good. So I think we program in a way that's smart, that won't put people at high risk for injury, and that's at least what we found.
You're just trying to get a little bit stronger every day.
Exactly.
Versus like you're not trying to dig a really deep hole.
Exactly, just not overdoing it, just making sure that people can recover from those trainings fast enough to not put themselves at a high risk for injury.
Are there any times after competitions where you're not training like that, where you're just like, you know what, for a couple months I'm just going to do some Metcon CrossFit things, or just do prowler pushes and strongman stuff, or is it like that every week, or is there a variety depending on when competitions are for you?
Yeah, for sure. So I like to treat my competition schedule in seasons, and I think that one of the things that is commonly overlooked is the fact that powerlifting and Olympic weightlifting are just like any other sport. You can't just like do it 365 days a week in a competition style mentality. Like, I think it's important to go through phases where you're not training specifically for Olympic lifting or powerlifting, and you should just do kind of like general style training. Like you said, CrossFit is great, strongman or whatever, just something to get your heart rate up and work on your endurance and your work capacity, rather than just be so kind of focused on 3-5 movements, whatever it is that you're training for. So yeah, like I said, throughout the year, I usually pick 1 or 2 big competitions, and then based on that, I kind of start planning my training schedule around that. Have a phase where it's general and I'm just focusing on endurance, feel good, working on muscular imbalances, working on holes that I've seen in other training sessions that I really see that I need a lot more work on, and then from there kind of like start building it up as the competition approaches.
I'd actually love to hear your thoughts on muscular imbalances. So have you found any imbalances over the last year, and how have you fixed those imbalances?
We all have muscular imbalances. I mean, there's not one person that's just like built perfectly. So, I mean, have I found any muscular imbalances personally?
Yeah, for you.
She's like, except for me.
Except for me, I'm built perfectly.
Yeah.
Like side asymmetries, or just one lagging muscle group that if you fix that weaker muscle group, your entire lift would probably go up, things like that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that one of the biggest things that exposes what your weaknesses are and what you need to work on is your preferential lifting style. So to give you an example, I am really good at sumo deadlifting, but I suck at conventional. So like, what does that mean? I mean, it could be anatomical, like just I'm built in a way that is just biomechanically advantageous for me to be in that sumo position. That's one reason. And the other reason could be, muscle preferences. Like my quads are probably way stronger than my hamstrings and my glutes, for example, as opposed to someone that deadlifts conventional that has a really strong glutes and hamstrings, to give you an example. So what does that say to me? That means that I should probably, in my off-season, do less sumo and do more conventional to strengthen my glutes and my hamstrings.
Right, so during or getting close to competition, you're focusing on your strengths, but you don't address the weakness until you get out and away from the competition.
I do some conventional deadlifting too, as even when I'm in competition schedule, but I think that the off-season is really a really good time to focus on that even more.
So if someone was they thought about doing hybrid, they're like, great, I actually love powerlifting and weightlifting, I want to try both. What would be some of the mistakes that people would make just jumping into it, and how should they not, or how should they avoid it?
And you mean if they jump into our hybrid performance method,
Yours,
or
or they're
just
going to make up their
general?
own. Like they got so inspired by you to do both, they decided I'm going to make my own powerlifting / weightlifting program. In other words, why should they listen to you instead of just make up their own?
Let's take a break and then get into that.
Okay.
Awesome. We're back with Steffi, and we were on a break and we were wanting to dig into something. This happens a lot. We take a break and then it's like, oh yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to briefly mention when Doug asked me
It's actually a little bit closer. Just like,
when Doug asked me a question about like how do you stay in a weight class while also trying to maximize strength, and a point that I really wanted to bring up is that there's 2 things that are the main drivers for strength increases. One is hypertrophy, and 2 are the neural adaptations that come with strength training. Okay, so it's common to see, let's say, like a huge bodybuilder, huge muscles, that is not strong, right? Like you can have hypertrophy without the neural adaptations, without the strength improvements. How your program is designed is pretty much what's going to determine if you get stronger or not. Even though it's well known that a muscle with a bigger cross-sectional area, a bigger muscle has the potential to become a stronger muscle just because there's more muscle fibers there for motor units to innervate. But you can have increases in strength without the increase in size. And that is what we know as the neural adaptations. And basically what that is how well can your brain control the timing and coordination of your muscles at that point to perform a skilled movement. So, like, is that connection coordinated, and how is the frequency of that firing from your brain is pretty much what's going to determine how strong your contraction is. So that's just a point that I wanted to bring up. What do you have to say?
Yeah, I was going to say muscle physiologist. You want to fill us in on neuroadaptation?
Well, yeah. The other portion of it actually is the individual muscle fibers themselves can enhance the contractility without getting bigger.
There you go.
So the neural adaptation is funny. I'm being a muscle guy. I like to give all the credit to muscle, not the nerve. Fuck the nerve.
Yeah. What did it ever do for us?
Yeah. But your point is the same. Where these are some of the things that allow you to produce more force without necessarily having to be bigger.
Exactly.
So the nerves are more efficient. We have an increased synchronization. So the right ones fire at the right times. The pennation angle, so the angle at which the muscle connects to the bone, can change. And this is going to have a trade-off between velocity and force. So if it moves in a certain direction, it'll contract faster.
The pennation angle changes based on how big it is, you mean?
Based on training.
On training.
Yeah, as a result of chronic training.
Okay.
And how you train probably influences how it changes as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the fibers, you're deep up into the physiology, the sarcoplasmic reticulum, which is what releases the calcium that allows the muscle fibers to contract. That is thought to actually increase its calcium sensitivity. The contraction velocity, all that we've seen in our lab, change as a result of strength training. And I think one of the fun things that we've always wanted to do is to compare a powerlifting or weightlifting type of training compared to a more hypertrophic or bodybuilding thing. And we haven't really been able to do this, but I would almost guarantee my career that the strength-based training would actually allow the fibers to enhance their sensitivity of the calcium on the troponin. That will increase the contraction velocity. So all that to say, you're totally right, is my point. That you can train and be very, very strong and powerful without actually having to make the muscle bigger, which is really important for weight class folks like yourself and any of the athletes that Doug and I work with. But I always say this is also a point for anyone who wants to get stronger but doesn't want to just look bigger. Like, there are a lot of physiological mechanisms that allow you to get that strength goal, power goal, or endurance goal without adding any more bulk to your frame if you don't want. Right?
I feel like we need to edit in like a list alongside you guys as you're just saying that. It's like words to Google. It's like sarcoplasmic reticulum, calcium, troponin, tropomyosin.
Crossbridge.
Go Google all those words.
Get on it, man.
We don't have time to
Do you do anything around here?
Yeah.
Gosh. What's the budget for this guy?
Too much.
So to change subject real quick. So the other day on your Instagram, you were showing like a half kneeling. Good God, what was it called? Half kneeling windmill. And you were making the point that you can get more range of motion, but you have to lock that range of motion in place by strengthening the end range. You want to dig in that topic a little bit?
Awesome.
Yeah, sure. Stretching and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So basically, what I said in that post is that stretching without taking your body through that range of motion and utilizing that new range of motion is like typing a lengthy Word document and never clicking save. Like, your muscles are not just. It's really, really hard to change the length and tension of your muscles and of your fascia just by stretching. It's really, really difficult. So we know that muscle length and tone is also modulated by your nervous system and by your brain, and how you can control that one muscle is active and the other muscle is relaxed so that you can get into that stretch position, right? So essentially, I like to incorporate more active stretches and active movements in which I put my body into the range of motion that I want to achieve, and just kind of like consciously activate certain muscles and try to relax certain muscles so that I can lock in that range. And the second important point about stretching is that you need to be able to stabilize in that range of motion in order for you to be able to use it. So I think that a lot of people fixate so much on mobility and like increasing range of motion. You see like people with the bands and CrossFit gyms for like 40 minutes before their workouts, mobilizing and increasing range of motion, yet they're still getting injured. Because really there's no research that says that more stretching leads to lower risks of injury at all. So can you increase the range of motion? Great, good for you. But can you stabilize in that range of motion? Because a loose joint, a lax ligament is not gonna do you any good if you don't have stability in that motion. So we always want to have that proximal stability if you want to keep injury risk low. Another important point about stretching is that I think it's important to see if you have like discrepancies from like one side of the body to the other. Because that, I mean, then you do really want to spend some time stretching that. For example, if you have one hamstring that's tighter than the other, I think one that's pretty common for people is hip internal rotation. Like if you sit down like this and then you try the other side, you're gonna see that you have one hip that's like super locked up, and that's something that you really want to address with joint mobilizations or even some degree of like static stretching. Did I answer the question?
What was my question?
I don't know.
It doesn't matter.
But there are some people that would argue
Yes, you did.
more towards your point that the ability to increase muscle length is almost nil. In other words, like there's strong discussion that you really can't change the length of the muscle, so any improvement in range of motion is actually coming from connective tissue, and that also appears to be extremely unlikely because it is such a non-plastic tissue. So most of it then is surmised to be coming from the neurological aspect of it, which is why PNF stretching is so effective acutely, right? You can see changes of 10, 20% within seconds, right? This is why reciprocal inhibition works so effective, right? This is why when you're stretching your hamstring, contract your quad, right? Because then you'll take advantage of Golgi tendon organs, things like that, and you can see it's much more effective. But to your, I think if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, is that's all well and good, but then at that point you still need to then make it contract.
Yeah, you have to
But under some force.
Exactly. You have to lock that range of motion in with some kind of active movement. Like even if you're trying to increase your hip flexion, like you stretch it here, this is great. Like look at how much motion I have here, but can I lock it in? No, like it falls.
Ah, I
Right?
see.
So like, can you actively hold that position? And actually, I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Andrew Ospina.
Oh yeah, sure,
He's a
sure.
functional
Yeah,
rehabilitation
yeah,
guy.
sure.
So I love what he's putting out. So I'm actually flying to Toronto next weekend to sit down at his seminar. It's a 3-day long thing. And I'm really, really excited to see all that he has to say about active stretching and that kind of stuff. I don't have that much information now, but
I'm just going to go ahead and guess, since you're a young female, that you're super mobile and flexible.
it's debatable.
Okay.
I am more flexible than Hayden, that's for sure.
Oh. Yeah, come on. Look at him. Look at that posture. He's terrible. He's text-necking right now. No, so I just want to know, could you walk us through, because I'm sure you do some stretching, some mobilization. What's your warm-up or stretching look like? Are those separate things? How do you work that into your training?
So I usually, I start my workouts with a dynamic warm-up. So basically kind of like lunges, forward lunges with like rotations, and side-to-side lunges.
You're allowed to do that in powerlifting?
Yeah.
I thought all that was illegal.
No, well, you don't do anything side to side.
No way.
No way.
No, you just, yeah, most people just say you have to like stay
Right,
here.
right.
Otherwise you lose all your gains.
Yeah.
No. So yeah, I just incorporate some dynamic stretches at the beginning of my workout, and if I'm feeling tight, maybe at the end, just kind of like a little feel good, a little stretch at the end.
Okay.
But
So you normally don't do any static stretching?
no, normally not. I've gone into Pilates lately,
Right?
and I actually love it. I think that a lot more.
No one likes it until they try it. And
Have you done it?
Right.
No.
You've never done it?
I'm afraid.
You have never done it?
I'll get sucked in.
Oh.
Seriously, you
That's
would.
how
It's fun. Yeah, kind of. It's
I like
horrible. Yeah. Like your hip flexors and stuff. You're like, oh, I'm dying. And you're like a minute and a half in. It's awful.
Oh, I should probably do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
Why did you want to do Pilates?
Just like your work, how you incorporate stretching and stuff into
Oh
it.
yeah, so Pilates is, I've been incorporating Pilates for maybe 2-3 times a week. Now that I'm in the off season of training, I have time to focus on the things that are important that I don't always focus on when I'm preparing for a meet. So I mean it's an amazing way to increase stability, especially like off your hip and off your trunk,
Sure.
while at the same time getting into positions that give you nice, safe stretches.
So what are your thoughts on just incorporating range of motion work into your workout? Like if you were doing chin-ups with just like a 10-second hold at the bottom of each rep, or doing pec flies with the intention of getting a deep stretch at the bottom of the movement, or pause squats where it's a 7-second hold at the bottom of the range of motion of a full depth high bar Olympic style squat or like a front squat, things like that to increase range of motion while getting strong in those end range positions.
Yeah, all of that is great as long as while you're, let's say you're doing the 7-second pause at the bottom of the squat, as long as you're not relying on your ligaments to hold that position. You know, I see people kind of just like sitting down and then just like boom, they just kind of relax in that position. That's not necessarily good. Shouldn't be relying on ligament or even bone to hold a position. You should always kind of stay active in the position. But I think it's a good way to go about it as long as you're not just basically relaxing in that.
Well, I mean, you see that a lot of people will pause squat.
Yeah,
It's almost like they're like relaxing at the bottom. And then it shows up when they're squatting with speed because it's like they're skipping steps.
Right.
It's like a bounce out of the bottom all the time. And in weightlifting, like it's great to catch a bounce out of the bottom on a snatch or a clean, but it's not what you want to do every time. It's not what you want to practice. You want to be very strong at the bottom, which means you have a lot of tension throughout your entire body in that position.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, so if I have short hamstrings,
You have short hamstrings?
yeah, they're like super short.
How do you know?
Because they're right here.
Just call them
It's like from here to here.
Oh, he just got called out.
Yeah. I would say I have tight hamstrings. What do I do? Like if that's something that I think is a limiter, what exercise or stretch would you have someone do?
You can do kettlebell, double kettlebell, what's it called? I'm looking for it. Like a Romanian deadlift, double kettlebell, Romanian deadlift.
Like a
Straight
single
leg.
leg?
With a lockdown.
Yeah.
With
It's
locked
great. It's
out.
different it does it.
Yeah, or just in like an RDL, like really stretching out those hamstrings and going to an range, maybe like in a deficit even, to kind of like gain some length.
Should I hold the bottom, or should it just kind of be active?
Honestly, I don't know what the consensus is, like what does research say of like what is more optimal.
I can tell you research is not going to have a good opinion on
There
that.
you go.
Yeah, but
So I guess it would just be preference. I mean, can you hold it, or maybe do both? Do some with a hold, do some without a hold. What do you feel that feels good that day?
Huh.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to circle back what Andy was asking before the break. If somebody wants to get in, or is it done?
don't give him credit.
Who's getting the
I
credit?
Good
thought of it
question.
first, and then I told Andy.
Oh, that's right.
No, I'm gonna ask it. Someone wants to get in that, like they're a weightlifter or a power lifter, and I think a lot of people, especially if they come from CrossFit, have interest in being strong in all 5 lifts. What is the initial approach on that? Obviously, they could work with you, but a lot of times people are just gonna like start diving into it. What are the common mistakes that people are making when they're trying to get strong at so many things at once?
There's always the overdoing effect. The more is always better, no pain, no gain syndrome that most people have. That they think that, I just need to do more of this and more of that and more of that. When honestly, that's not necessarily the case, and that's not the way that we program either. Like we're very methodical in the way that we program and the way that the workouts are scheduled. And I think your question was more like, why should
It was the better question.
why
Yeah,
should they listen to us instead of
Yes.
just like doing it by themselves?
Right.
And I think
I
it's
see why you like that question better.
yeah, right. It's a good question. I like it too. And I think it boils down to, like you said, evidence or literature doesn't always have an answer for everything. And I don't think there's an answer of, is it a better training method to incorporate the 5 lifts in one if you're trying to get better at Olympic lifting and powerlifting? There really is not an answer. What I can tell you from experience is that it does. And so I think part of our credibility is the fact that we've successfully been able to partake in both sports and compete at a high level in both sports without getting injured and while making progress for 2 years, which is how long we've been together and competing and running hybrid. So I just think experience combined with basic understandings on strength and conditioning and physical therapy and exercise physiology, I think it's a strong combination.
So with hybrid, are you literally doing all 5 lifts in a week?
Yeah.
Or how does that look?
Yeah, so with hybrid, you'll have the squat and deadlift frequency is pretty high, and then you'll be doing some kind of snatch, some kind of clean and jerk twice or 2 or 3 times a week.
So squatting, what was it, 4 days a week? Benching 3 days a week or something, or 4?
Actually, how many days a week do they bench in hybrid?
Okay, yeah, so
Yeah.
right, so 3 days a week you're pressing.
Mm-hmm.
New messing up, and then one day a week or so snatching, one day a week of clean.
Yeah, and different variations. We like to add in complexes
Mhm.
so that so people aren't so that forces people to stay at lighter loads and not necessarily max out those lifts and really get the benefits from the higher intensity and volume of the squats and deadlifts and really get strong while at the same time they're practicing the skill and motor patterns of snatching and clean and jerking at the same time.
So earlier you said that more is not necessarily better, which is something that people say a lot on the show. It seems to be a recurring theme from many of our guests. So how would somebody know if they were doing too much?
They're not making progress in training. They're constantly injured. They're complaining about lack of motivation. Like they're mentally checked out of training. I think those are the three main factors for just doing too much.
I feel like sometimes if people aren't making progress, they don't go, oh, I'm doing too much. They go, I'm not doing enough.
Exactly.
You gotta ramp it up again until they get injured, and then when they get injured, or like they just totally lose motivation, then they're like, oh, okay, now I think I'm doing too much. And then they try to pull it back.
You have no idea how many times you get emails like, hey, so I'm doing CrossFit in the morning, weightlifting in the afternoon, and then I'm doing powerlifting. Do you think I can add the
You get those emails
gymnastics
too?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got a lot of those too.
And we're like,
And hypocaloric. Right.
that too. I'm
Doing
like,
keto.
yeah.
Right.
And I'm like, no, actually, I think that you should do the complete opposite. How about you just do one
Right.
for a
Yeah.
little bit?
Yeah.
Just-
So speaking of injuries, you were injured at some point over the course of the last year, and you've been battling back from that.
Mhm.
Where are you at with that now?
Yeah, so I'm pretty much, I don't want to say 100%, but maybe 95, 98%. I had a little back strain at the beginning of the year in January. I had just come back from taking a whole month off. I was traveling in Japan, took a month off, and not because I wanted to, but literally there were no gyms open. In December, which is New Year's season, everything closes like 10 days before, 10 days after. So we were pretty much forced to not train, which wasn't that great. But so I came back. I think that I started pushing it a little bit too fast as soon as I got back and just started having some back pain. And because I was preparing for a huge meet at the time, I had the US Open, the USPA US Open in April, and there's money involved and there's recognition involved, and I kind of really wanted to compete. And even though I knew that it wasn't the best thing for me to push past the injury, I still did it. And I honestly, looking back at it, I don't know why. I think the best thing to do when you're injured is really listen to your body and give your tissues enough time to heal, because that's the only thing you have control over. You can't control how fast you're gonna recover, right? So you just gonna have to take a step back and wait until you feel better.
What was your rehab process?
So basically, I stayed away from any squatting and deadlifting and started focusing a lot on single leg movements, wrist movements, like stuff when I'm holding on to benches or the wall, so that I don't have to stabilize that much in my trunk. I added in the Pilates, which I think that really, really helped me. More so mentally, I think. Like I felt like I was doing something,
Yeah.
that was benefiting me and was good for my health. And also, I mean, it's made the symptoms a lot better. I was seeing also a chiropractor at the time, pretty religiously, 2 to 3 times per week. So I got soft tissue work in and mobilizations and that kind of stuff. But I think the main point was that I didn't just stop training, didn't just stop going to the gym. Because I think it's way harder to get back in if you
kept the habit.
Exactly. I kept showing up to the gym and doing whatever felt okay, whatever didn't exacerbate my symptoms at the time.
Yeah, and then you attacked your rehab from a bunch of different angles, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I think another huge mistake to make is like, oh, I'm just going to the chiropractor or I'm just doing A, B, and C. When really, when you have specifically low back injuries, which are so non-descriptive and so hard to identify what the problem is, you probably should therefore attack it from a bunch of different angles.
Exactly.
I think a lot of people, when Doug and I were running the gym, it was extremely common to hear people, they hurt their thumb, and then they're like, oh, I can't come train. It's like, and they just sit on the couch, and it's like, just moving and having your blood flow, and it is going to help recovery. Like just this super, small basics, even if it's going for a walk. But a lot of times people suffer an injury and just completely shut down. And for someone, and people will do that over like an ankle or something, but your back, which is involved in everything, you pretty much can't do anything without hurting it, and you were still really active. It sounds like.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a postdoc in my lab right now, Irene Tobias. She's a powerlifter and CrossFitter / triathloner.
Wow.
Yeah, so she's all over the
I
place.
do it all.
And so since she has been in my lab, we have actually gotten really sort of interested in the female athlete, particularly the female strength athlete. And again, by we, I mean I forced to become. Because she's driving it down my throat how we never study females and these type of athletes. So I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on training for these strength and power sports as a female versus a male. Should you train differently? Do you guys train differently? What are your thoughts on that?
So, speaking from a completely anecdotal standpoint, from my own experience, Hayden and I follow the same exact program that we've written, and we train the exact same way, and it's yielded really, really good results for both.
Yeah.
But I think that the main thing would be to understand what holes in training you have. So, an example would be I have a way weaker upper body than Hayden.
Right, relatively. Right.
Relatively.
But you're going to see that always in females.
In females, exactly.
Right.
So maybe I needed to increase my upper body and benching frequency up so that I can catch up. And then the other one is how much volume can you tolerate?
Mm-hmm.
So it's been proven that guys have a lower tolerance for volume than females,
Generally, yeah.
generally speaking. So, for me, I can withstand a lot more volume and I can add in more lower body exercises, more upper body exercises without getting injured and recovering quickly. Whereas Hayden sometimes needs to, or guys would need to take a step back in that volume and really make sure that they're recovered before the next training session.
Yeah, so sounds like the core of your program is identical, but then you may be doing a few accessory things at the end to add more volume for you and add more upper body, and he may be taking more recovery.
Exactly.
So I feel like a lot of people talk about, this is backed by science and you got to look at the research, et cetera, but I feel like, in my experience, if you haven't gone through graduate school, then you haven't spent a lot of time actually looking at research. Most of the coaches I know that talk about science and research have never looked at a scientific paper ever before.
Right.
You guys are the exception to this. Like, you guys have looked at a lot of research. You guys both are into research in some respects. So I'm curious, for people that have never looked at any research before, like, how would you get started actually reading real scientific research on training?
How would you start reading research?
Yeah, where would you start? How do you do it? Like, if someone's never done it before, like, what do they do?
I think you first need to understand the basics of research and understand statistics, I would say.
Right.
Because all of these papers are open for interpretation. Like, you can read that paper and I can read that paper and I can get to a completely different conclusion if either of those of us doesn't understand how to read the paper and what those numbers actually mean. So I would say first understanding statistic and research and what standard deviation is and what all of those terms that come up in those papers mean, and not just kind of reading the abstract, jumping all the paper, and then just reading the conclusion and concluding the same thing as the author. So
Yeah,
what would you
I would
say?
agree. I would say that actually, specifically to your question, Doug, if you're really the average everyday person and you really don't care, what I would say is don't waste your time. Just don't even start, because you're going to get tracked, you're going to say the wrong thing. If you are someone like us who's interested, then you can learn these things. There's a bunch of websites like ResearchGate where people can go to, and these are generally a bunch of free PDFs that the authors are putting the stuff up on. So for people like you that are interested, you can go there. In addition, there's a lot of people who are putting out a ton of infographics on Instagram or websites and things where they're taking research and they're breaking it down into like a fairly user-friendly version.
Yeah, those summaries are killer.
Yeah, I mean, Wild and Sports Science is great at that. Brett and Chris Beardley's things, those are all
You know who
fantastic.
started an amazing compilation of articles? Greg Knuckles,
Yeah, great. Yeah.
Eric Cressy, and what's the third one?
Helms? No, it's
Mike.
that's
it Mike
old
Schmidt?
Tortoise. Yeah,
Yeah.
the Daily Engineering Period.
So they started it's called MASS, Monthly Applications in Strength, and something like that. And they basically, you buy a subscription, and what they do is they take all of these complicated research and they put it in ways that you can understand it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, they've got those. There's Alan Aragon's got the same
Yeah.
thing. He's had for like a decade or more, for forever. Those are all places to start for the general person, because you're very good. There's a great paper, or a couple of papers that I love to make this point. 2 classic studies I use in my class, and what they did is they wanted to look at muscle recovery, and their version, this paper, they were referring to muscle glycogen. So this is the sugar you store in your muscle, So you burn that during a workout, right? And they want to look at whether or not I gave you protein, or protein and carbohydrate at the same calorie total, both cases, right? And see which one enhanced muscle recovery. Or did it? And in both two papers from two different labs,
How do you measure muscle recovery?
the muscle glycogen.
Okay.
So how quickly the muscle glycogen came back.
Okay.
So you biopsy them before, biopsy them afterwards. And both papers showed no difference in muscle glycogen recovery between the protein group and the protein and carbohydrate group. Okay, now that's the indisputable fact, right? That's what's proven. But the fun part then is what's the title of the paper and what's the conclusion, right? So now this is entirely true. This is a great example of you and I could both look at the same piece of data and have completely opposite conclusions and both be 100% right. So for example, I read that and I went, oh, okay,